In the complex world of Iranian politics and economics, few figures have deftly walked the tightrope between reform and conservatism as Abdolnasser Hemmati, an economist, diplomat, central banker, and presidential candidate. Born in 1956 in Hamadan, Iran, Hemmati grew up in a nation on the cusp of revolution. By the time he graduated from the University of Tehran with a degree in economics, the 1979-1980 Iranian Revolution had already reshaped the country's future. He began his career in media, serving as the director of the IRIB, that is, the Islamic Republic of Iran Broadcasting News Agency, but his true calling lay in numbers, policies, and the fragile balancing act of Iran's economy. In the 1990s and early 2000s, Hemmati rose through Iran's financial institutions. Twice he served as the head of the Central Insurance of Iran. His technocratic approach and calm demeanor won him respect across the political spectrum. Hemmati's style was never flashy, but he understood the machinery of Iran's economy better than most. He was the guy who got things done. In 2018, during one of the most turbulent financial periods in recent Iranian history, Hemmati was appointed as the governor of the Central Bank of Iran. U.S. sanctions had crippled the economy, inflation was soaring, the rial was collapsing. Hemmati's mission was to stabilize the economy, restore confidence, and navigate an impossible geopolitical landscape. He introduced currency reforms, engaged with European negotiators, and even traveled to China to shore up financial alliances. But for every policy success, sanctions and political opposition pushed back harder. He wasn't a magician. No one could fix the economy overnight under those conditions. But Hemmati slowed the collapse. He gave Iran breathing room. In 2021, Abdolnasser Hemmati did something few technocrats dared. He ran for president. As a moderate, he was seen as a reformist alternative to hardliners. His campaign promised rational governance, global engagement, and economic revival. He placed third in an election dominated by Ibrahim Raisi, but his candidacy symbolized a larger battle, the fight for moderation in an increasingly polarized Iran. Today, Hemmati continues to speak out on economic issues, advocating for fiscal transparency, international cooperation, and pragmatic reform. In a country of slogans and ideology, Hemmati remains an anomaly, an economist at heart, a pragmatist in practice. In a nation gripped by sanctions, inflation, and global isolation, one economist stood at the crossroads of ideology and pragmatism. Abdul Nasser Hemmati is a central banker, economic theorist, and a rare voice of moderation in Iran's turbulent economic sphere. Born in 1956, Hemmati came of age as Iran was on the brink of revolution. He studied economics at the University of Tehran and later earned a PhD from the University of Tehran's Faculty of Economics, where he became steeped in monetary theory and the mechanics of financial institutions. Hemmati's economic philosophy was neither doctrinaire nor radical. His approach was defined by monetary realism, which involves managing inflation expectations, currency stability, and financial institutions through careful incremental policy tools. Hemmati is not a revolutionary economist. He believes in institutional reform, incredible monetary policy, and in integrating Iran with the global economy, not through politics, but through sound economics. When Hemmati was appointed governor of the central bank in 2018, Iran faced a perfect storm. Reimposed U.S. sanctions, declining oil exports, and plummeting investor confidence. Hemmati inherited a currency in freefall. He responded with a strategy grounded in exchange rate management, psychological market intervention, and shadow rate suppression. He tried to unify the official and black market exchange rates while injecting calm into a panicked economy. But Hemmati didn't believe in brute force control. He opposed heavy-handed rationing and instead sought to build credibility, a central tenet of modern central banking. He believed the central bank had to rebuild its reputation, not by promising miracles, but by doing the basics right: transparency, communication, and resisting political interference. He advocated for a gradual shift from subsidy-heavy populism to market-based mechanisms. Hemmati argued that Iran's economic ailments, structural inflation, capital flight, and unproductive subsidies were not short-term crises, but long-term consequences of policy distortion. His theoretical stance aligned with new Keynesian principles: active but restrained government intervention, predictable fiscal policy, and central bank independence, though with the unique constraints of Iran's political system. Under his leadership, the central bank introduced more rigorous supervision of financial institutions, cracked down on illegal forex trade, and introduced digital banking reforms to modernize Iran's sluggish banking sector. Hemmati also saw international finance not just as a tool for diplomacy, but a necessity for survival. He pushed for mechanisms like Instex, the EU-backed special trade channel, to bypass U.S. sanctions, showcasing his belief in pragmatic globalization. In 2021, Hemmati entered the presidential race, not as a populist, but as a policymaker. His campaign emphasized economic stabilization, investment, climate reform, and the necessity of rejoining global financial systems to attract capital and technology. He didn't win, but his economic blueprint, technocratic, cautious, and reform-driven, left a lasting imprint on the debate about Iran's future. MIT's ideas weren't just about survival, they were about modernization, from reforming how banks lend to how Iran sees its place in the global economy. Abdolnasser Hemmati is not a household name, but in the world of policy, he's a steady hand in a storm, committed to rational reform, one policy lever at a time. In a land of upheaval, he offered a different kind of revolution, the quiet, persistent force of economics. Abdolnasser Hemmati never claimed to be revolutionary, but his proposed reforms, if implemented, would have represented a fundamental shift in how Iran thinks about its economy. At the heart of Hemmati's agenda was a simple but radical idea for Iran: economic rationality. He believed that long-term stability required more than rhetoric. It required institutions, accountability, and a market that could breathe. Hemmati's reform proposals focused on four pillars. Pillar one was currency stabilization through market trust. While many in Iran's leadership favored fixed exchange rates and opaque controls, Hemmati argued for a managed float, guided by clear communication with the market. He sought to narrow the gap between official and black market exchange rates, not by artificial suppression, but through supply-demand alignment and better currency allocation systems. He wasn't saying let the market go wild, but he wanted to stop pretending the rial was worth more than it really was. Honesty was part of his economic toolkit. Pillar two of Hemmati's reform proposals was cutting energy subsidies and redistributing smartly. Unlike many populist politicians, Hemmati was openly critical of Iran's massive fuel and energy subsidies, which consume over $600 billion annually. He proposed a gradual reduction, paired with targeted cash transfers to low-income families. This proposal sharply contrasted with leaders like Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who implemented direct subsidies without structural reform, and Ibrahim Raisi, whose administration was reluctant to fully phase out the subsidy system for fear of backlash. Pillar three of Hemmati's proposals was strengthening banking supervision and reducing liquidity mismanagement. Hemmati warned against the unchecked expansion of liquidity, often driven by politically connected banks and quasi-governmental lenders. He advocated stricter banking supervision, transparency in balance sheets, and restructuring non-performing loans. He viewed Iran's fragile banking sector not as a side issue, but as a ticking time bomb, something largely ignored by both hardliners and some reformists. Pillar four of his policies was global economic integration. Hemmati stood apart from Iran's economic orthodoxy in one significant way. He didn't see international institutions as threats. He saw them as tools for survival. He supported Iran's engagement with Financial Action Task Force and World Trade Organization accession. He called for joining SWIFT, promoting foreign direct investment, and normalizing trade mechanisms. In contrast, leaders like Ibrahim Raisi and factions of the Revolutionary Guard viewed these measures as Western traps. Hemmati, by contrast, believed strategic integration was not capitulation, it was modernization. But Hemmati's most controversial stance was his insistence that economic policy must be shielded from political interference. He was saying, let the central bank be independent. Let us make decisions based on data, not ideology. That's dangerous talk in a system built on ideological consensus. While others chased short-term gains or ideological loyalty, Hemmati laid out a blueprint for slow, sustainable reform. His economic vision was not just about stabilizing numbers. It was about building credibility, trust, and a future that looked outward, not just inward. In the chaos of sanctions and domestic tension, Abdolnasser Hemmati proposed something rare, a plan rooted not in fantasy, but in economics.